Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
Hey, listeners, welcome back to the Farm for Profit Podcast. This is Tanner.
This is Corey.
I had one of those moments just now of I didn't know which camera I should be looking at. What's my best side?
I don't think you have a good side. Or a good intro anymore. Why are you so boring in the intro?
Going to
our guest, who we're going to introduce here soon, said he feels like he's on the Pat McAfee show, and we need to raise the energy here.
I need to stand up. If I'm going to be on that show?
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Now I'm out of frame.
He's really not that tall. The camera just makes him look that way.
This table's 24 inches on the floor. We actually have Corey on his knees.
Anyway, enough of that. Listeners, we love that you connect with us. This is another show that was a suggestion from you guys. So you can get with us on our brand new email. We still have farmforprofitllc@gmail.com, but you can actually look us up now at connect@farmforprofit.com. That's our new connection.
That's the way to connect with Farm for Profit.
And you can still call or text us, 515-207-9640. We love getting those. Those go to Tanner. He never shares them with me, so I don't know what you guys say. I think it's because you guys are all saying how much you love me and just want more of me, so that's why I don't see it.
What do you mean I never share them with you?
You don't. I haven't seen. I see them come through on the email all the time, but I don't want to click them because then I know that you know that I saw it.
I will grab a couple of them here once we get our guest introduced to be able to share some of those, because we should. They a lot of those come in quite nicely.
Yeah.
Here. We have one here from a second-generation Michigan farmer and media producer. Have a ton of extra time in the cab this fall and figured they'd reach out to let us know that we do a great job on this podcast. So appreciate that, listener. Hopefully we filled your ears this fall, and hopefully you had a very successful harvest.
Yeah. So it is the Monday before Thanksgiving. Hope you guys had a good harvest. Hope you're done with harvest, got all the field work you wanted done, and you're getting ready to celebrate with your family. Have some good American-made protein, whether it's a turkey, whether it's prime rib, beef, ham. I don't care. Do them all.
That's right.
A turducken.
We get to introduce our guest for today, Jim Eggleston. He practices being an attorney. I love that too. Like doctors, they practice. Attorneys, they practice. Like they never have to say they are an expert.
Yeah. We practice podcasting.
We are a practicing podcaster in the areas of commercial real estate, farm and real estate, private equity financing, farm and ranch relations, partitions, mediations, business acquisitions and transitions, as well as asset protection, but all things agribusiness. Welcome to the podcast.
What the heck is real estate? I thought real estate was real.
No, it's not. But real estate's real.
I have no idea what it's reading, but it probably at one time said farm and ranch real estate, but who knows?
I love it. He is a founding partner of Eggleston King and Davis.
Correct.
Out of Weatherford, Texas.
Beautiful Weatherford, Texas, God's country.
Have you always been in Texas?
Went to law school at Kansas, Rock Chalk, and I knew that would. I did.
And the interview's over.
I did have a funny story about wearing my KU hat to the land report last year, where I first saw you guys, and I wore my KU hat in Iowa, and they were just giving me grief left and right. But I determined I would always wear that hat because I met so many people from Iowa to give me crap about that hat. And they were all super friendly, but that hat was like a magnet for people to come up and talk to me. Anyway.
It's a conversation starter, like this shirt.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So after I graduated from Kansas, it was too cold, and my wife was from Texas, so we moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I've been here for 46 years. Wow. That's a long time.
Meet Maya Cornheads, built better for over 40 years to power through down corn, high yields, and tough fields without flinching.
These durable, low-maintenance heads mean less downtime, less grain loss, and more profit per acre. They have the option for down corn attachments or direct-driven chopping. They ensure that your combine will move smoothly, fast, and full at all times.
Don't just harvest your fields, conquer them. Visit mycornheads.com to find the dealer near you.
You got to talk to him yesterday in preparation for this episode. What he's not telling you is that may not be his only alma mater.
Yeah,
Well, normally, yeah.
Yeah, the other one I'm not, well, I'm proud of the other one. But first of all, 2 days ago was my birthday on November 22nd. And I am looking to become the oldest graduate from the University of Arkansas Ag and Food Law Masters in Law program. So I kind of got to start late in life being an expert. Yeah, we do just practice. We practice. That's all we do. It's a little bit like I get to hit the batting cage, but they never really let me get into the lineup. I just practice. So,
Well, happy belated birthday!
Yeah,
2 days.
I'm glad you shared that. We will maybe try to get you something, a little happy birthday message on the 22nd. But no, what a cool deal! He's still in college.
Still in college.
Never stop learning. You stay younger that way, right?
You know, it started in just a real quick. My wife and I 2 years ago, I just told her I could never retire. I love what I do. I love the farm and ranch. I love ag, and I can't retire. And we have a farm, and we bought. You know, we did the cattle thing, and it's like that's what we're going to do. And I said, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can retire. And so she said, well, whatever we do, it's got to be for the greater good. And so the greater good for her was she loves Israel. And so this is broadcasting on the 24th. On the 21st, she arrived back from Israel for 3 weeks serving on a military base. So she then asked me, well, what's your greater good? I said, I want to figure out ag and food problems. I want to figure out food and water by 2050. 2050 problems, 2050 solutions. So I don't have enough time to work years and years for credibility. So I had to go back and get another piece of paper to give me that credibility. So, but it's cool. The Arkansas people and the National Ag Law Center in Arkansas and a lot of the ag programs legally revolve around the University of Arkansas. So it's pretty good, great school.
That's a Razorback.
I'm a Jayhawk. I'm sorry.
I don't know. What if you put a Jayhawk and a Razorback in the same room? What do you think would win?
I hope the Razorback. I don't know. I think Jayhawks are the most annoying fans in the world.
Well,
I think that's why we do gravitate towards you, because I think whenever comes to Ames, and usually it's basketball season, right? We always want to be Jayhawks. I had a kid and his dad sit behind me up in the nosebleeds with my wife, trying to have a good game, and Jayhawks kicked our butt every single time they scored a point. It was rock chalk in my ear all game long. Even my wife, who doesn't like sports, was like, I hate the Jayhawks.
Well, the best place I ever heard them do rock, chalk, Jayhawk, they do, was at the University of Texas. An alumni took me to the Texas KU basketball game. And I mean, 5 minutes left in the game, and the KU fans there start doing rock, chalk, Jayhawk in Texas arena with the Longhorns. It never sounded so beautiful right there. So anyway, I will say Ames is about as loud. I mean, y'all got a loud crowd, just almost like Allen Fieldhouse. So
Hilton Magic is a wonderful thing. If you could ever experience that, what does it hold? About 16,000, somewhere in there. And the acoustics of that place, boy, you can. I'd like to see the decibel meter of that when it's actually going. And man, I've been a part of a few of them. It is fun, and we don't hate the Jayhawks. That's what makes it fun. You guys are the heel of the Big 12, and everybody wants to beat you, so you got a target on your back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, Jim, enough about basketball and other sports.
Yeah.
But we got you on here to talk about real estate, especially from the attorney side of things. It's been a long time since we've had those types of considerations. One of the things yesterday when we discussed is maybe it'd be good to get some of the common made mistakes out of the way. A lot of our producers are corn and soybean territory. A lot of our producers are in those generational transitions. A lot of our producers are trying to find ways to buy their first pieces of property. So it'd be wise for them to maybe learn from others' mistakes. How do you think about maybe navigating some of the ones you've witnessed?
With the average age of the farmers now exceeding 60 years old, and as you probably had other guests say, the greatest transfer of wealth in this country ever is going to take place over the next 25 years. The greatest mistake for farmers is not planning for who's next and who is going to operate the farm. And farmers have generally a real desire for a legacy of leaving the farmers to the next generation. They've raised their kids. I'm a gigantic advocate and proponent of farm values. What I learned on the farm, what values kids learn on the farm, and so, but they don't leave their affairs or estate in an order for transition. And if a farmer has 4 or 5 kids, the chances are all 5 of them on a farm extraordinarily rare. Maybe 1, maybe 2. The other ones generally want their money. They want to go to the city. And so the worst way to leave your kid in charge of a farm is leaving with partners who don't want to be partners in a farm. So it's the thinking ahead, and it is the planning and succession plan. There is a great ranch, the R.A. Brown Ranch up near Throckmorton, Texas. They're almost a model of succession planning. Really discovering what do their kids want, what are they interested in, who's in, who's out, and then planning accordingly. One of the things you listed that we've done a lot over the last few years is partitions. And partitions it is a horrible, horrible thing to do to a family, where kids don't want to be involved in the farm, and the only way out is for ultimately one kid to sue, to say, I want out, so we're going to divide the farm. And the farm either gets divided in kind, you take this section, this quarter, or in cash, which requires then parts of the farm to be sold off. So that's a horrible way. And I've dealt with partitions that have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I have 3 or 4 partitions that I've worked on for 5 years, and nobody has wanted to sue anybody. They're just more interested in being mad and not solving the problem. So I would just, the first thing I would say is structurally get the farm in a proper structure to prevent liability. Build a wall and a shield around the operation so that we save the farm from a personal injury lawyer or even when we can, a creditor. And then secondly, go to how's this farm going to transition as an operation, and we don't build in a situation where kids are set up to disagree and to argue and to fight and that sort of thing. I'd say those are the 2 biggest things.
Yeah, we've got experience here amongst us hosts. Dave, who's not here at the moment, deals a lot with partition actions. Of course, he's the one that gets the phone calls from the sibling that wants to sell, right? That's why you contact an auctioneer and realtor is to sell something. And it can get ugly it does. It just flat out does get ugly almost every time that situation happens.
Yeah, they're tough conversations, but it's even tougher when it's coming from you, the lawyer, and there wasn't a plan.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it is just, these things can be solved, and Dave can probably tell you, these things can be solved for a much smaller amount of money than the amount of money and the heartache and the emotion that comes with one of those kinds of so-called fights, if you will.
Right.
The other thing, and a mistake, and I'll try to drop in things every once in a while as we talk about, don't ever do this. Okay. One of those is don't ever do this. Don't ever give your children and your grandchildren ownership of farms as co-owners, or legally we call them tenants in common, because then it takes 100% unanimity to do anything. And so I'm dealing with the partition where one owner owns 50%, one owner owns 25%. And the grandma and grandpa thought it would be a good idea to give all 15 grandchildren 1%. Okay.
Oh, smokes.
Every one of those kids has a 1% veto. And consequently, we're going on 5 years of trying to solve this because they've got a farm. They got a place to go to. It doesn't cost them any money. They don't have to work it. They've got a retreat, a lodge, or whatever. And so, don't set your kids up with that. And so anyway, the another one, and specifically talking about farmers, and up in your part of the world, risk management is getting to be just such a bigger and bigger issue with the cost of equipment, the cost of land, the liabilities that are created. Farming is one of the most dangerous occupations there is, not counting the rain and markets and lenders, So I would say develop those relationships with whether it's insurance people or a lawyer or even call the local USDA people and say, help me do risk mitigation. How do I eliminate my exposure to losing everything we've built? And so if I could help somebody or encourage somebody to think succession, estate planning, getting stuff in the right buckets is what I call it, risk mitigation, man, you sleep a whole lot better. You just sleep a whole lot better with those things.
So we try to put things into perspective for Dave, our co-host, on a frequent basis because for the most part, our listeners will go through real estate transactions in a very rare fashion throughout their lifestyle.
Right.
It's a rare occasion that you get to buy multiple pieces of ground, sell multiple pieces of ground during your 30 to 40 year farming career.
Mm-hmm.
Dave does it on a weekly basis. You have real estate closings on a weekly basis, and it seems old hat. Do you have any advice from both sides of the table, buying and selling, things to watch out for, things to do to make that process smooth and enjoyable?
That's a great question, and I can send you 10 pages of questions and things to look at, or I can give you a summary of just 2 or 3 items.
Yeah.
If I'm a buyer, ask questions. Due diligence. There is no stupid question when you're buying a ranch or a farm. I'm living on a place I would not buy today after owning it 25 years because I have no internet access. And I work from home all the time. So if you go look at a farm and say, what's your internet access? And the farm, the seller goes, who cares? It matters. Okay. Little thing. What school district are you in? What's your source of water? How do you dispose of trash? Do you have easements? So I'm gonna plant a flag on one of them. Get somebody to look at title. Okay, title issues are hugely important, and honestly, with the real estate agent, they aren't trained to look at the title. So what does that mean? And get title insurance. Look at the title to find out where the easements run. Okay, is an oil company going to come through and tear up your pasture? I have a client right now. Tear up your pasture because they're laying a pipeline, and he's probably lost about $80,000 worth of improvements in pasture and aesthetics. So look at the title. Easements, oil and gas. There on a lot of these legacy farms, there's so much old stuff from past operations that really will bite somebody unexpectedly. So due diligence. The other things, there are so many more free resources. USDA, probably Iowa's is as good as anybody. You can get soil samples. You can get, your soil test, that sort of thing. I just can't emphasize enough. Ask questions. Dig in. Go talk to the neighbors. How productive is this? Walk the fence line. So the fence is still up. If the fence goes down, a cow gets out, who always repairs it, And those kinds of questions. I just think, I grew up in a family of farmers. My great-grandfather homesteaded in Oklahoma. They're real reluctant to ask his neighbors anything. You don't want to share information. You don't want to try anything new. You want to do stuff just like Grandpa did. you ask a lot of farmers today, how much fertilizer are we going to put on this year? And they'll say, as much as I can afford. Well, that's not a great answer. Or how much did Grandpa put on there? With the development of technology, and I'm not a great tech guy, but with the development of technology, buyers have so much more resources available to them than ever before to make good decisions. And so I just can't say enough about due diligence before you close. Just ask questions, ask questions, ask questions.
Do you get much into mineral rights?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do a little bit too. I had a landlord that bought a piece of land, and the mineral rights were not his. He actually ended up negotiating to have that because it used to be a coal mine.
Yep.
There.
Yeah.
Mineral
rights are probably over the last 10 years here, 15, one of the biggest areas of litigation. Either you didn't get your mineral rights, and in Texas, I'm not sure about Iowa, but generally in states with mineral rights, we say you can sever the mineral rights from the surface rights. So you may own the surface, but you may not own the minerals. And so then if you buy the surface and you don't own the minerals, the person that owns the minerals has a superior right to come on the property, use the water, make roads, run pipelines, run electric lines, and there's nothing you can do about it. So investigate that. That's a gigantic problem, and of course that's great. That's a great thing to focus on. The other thing too is look at your lease, and those leases often have what we call blanket easements. In other words, I'm leasing all my oil and gas, but I'm giving the operator a blanket easement to go anywhere on my property to lay pipelines. Don't ever let them do that. Make them narrow it down to, I'll give you an easement within 10 feet of the property line. I'll give you an easement over here. You might even designate a drill site where you have to drill here and not up next to my house and that sort of thing. So much litigation, and frankly, in Texas, the operator almost always wins because of our attitude towards oil and gas, and that's generally true.
Yeah, that's one of the things in the state of Iowa that our Rush Hour Ag podcast, which maybe we should introduce Jim to as well, has been talking about is the potential for utilizing the hydrogen gas resources within the state.
Yep.
And that's probably why mineral rights is top of mind for us here as well, because it naturally couples with the transfer of title,
Yep.
but you still need to ask the question to make sure that it isn't something blocking that from happening either.
Well, in Texas, I don't think you'll have this same problem with water. Water is as valuable as the oil and gas is these days. I looked at a ranch a few years ago and was part of a group that was thinking about it or helping them. And let's just say the ranch was $20 million for 20,000 acres in West Texas. And it didn't come together. So about 2-3 years ago, I called and said, how much is that ranch? And in West Texas, they said, well, it's $22 million and we'll throw in the surface for free. In other words, if you want to sell the water had become more valuable than the surface. So water, oil and gas, wind turbines. We got a lot of wind turbines down here. Hydrogen. There's another word for another one that I think of, but yeah, it's good for you.
Solar farm
all over that.
Got some solar farms.
Soil farms.
Solar.
Oh yeah, we got them all over the place. And it's really interesting. Climate change and all that. However you feel about that, I've got mixed feelings. I mean, climate does change. I believe the Earth was created to heal itself. So in other words, we're in transitions. Things last and things don't last. So I won't even get into all that. But the very people that want solar and you lay the solar, it destroys the ground beneath it. It takes grass out of production. And until they've figured out a safe way to tilt these solar panels up and down, then it can be as harmful to the ground as anything. So I'm very mixed about wind and solar right now. I'm not sure it's worth it yet.
I will say Iowa State's doing some testing. It's called agrivoltaics. I toured it up south of Ames here last year. I don't know how much ground they've made, but at least they're testing the different orientations of solar panels, ones that move, doing agriculture, growing things, having livestock, things like that underneath these solar panels. It is possible.
Yeah.
I don't know how feasible it is yet, but at least they're trying, I guess.
So as you kind of give us some heads up, if you're the buyer, we want to ask a lot of questions.
Yep.
One of the questions that we get is, okay, we got an opportunity to buy. Haven't ever bought before. There's a belief going around that I need to create an LLC to take ownership of this land. Is that a recommendation? If you buy a piece, should you have a separate LLC for every piece of land or property you purchase?
Yes and no. Let's start with the first question, and that is, I would not ever buy a piece of land in my own individual name, ever. Just don't do it. So we form 98% of companies we form these days are LLCs. Very flexible. There's no extra layer of taxation. I'm going to dig down in just a second to the reason we prefer LLCs over everything else, but always build that shield around you, that insulation. Do I do more than one LLC? Before I did an LLC for each quarter section, I would do an LLC for my land, an LLC for my cattle, an LLC for my equipment. In other words, build a shield around areas of liability, not necessarily areas of geography. Okay, so if I'm milking cows and have large dairy, put that operation in an LLC, and then put your land in an LLC, and that way you're isolated. If something happens in the dairy, your land is protected. If somebody gets run over by a tractor, your land is protected. If somebody trespasses, which you shouldn't have liability, but it doesn't mean you won't get sued, and walks out into one of your stock tanks, I don't know what y'all call them in Iowa, we call them stock tanks, but some kid walks out and drowns in a stock tank, and then they claim it wasn't fenced off, then they can't hit the dairy and other things. So an LLC. Now, I want to get hyper technical just for 1 second. The reason we use a limited liability company versus a corporation is that a limited liability company is what we call a COPE, a charging order protected entity. Now, bear with me just for a second. If you get sued, Tanner, you own an LLC, and you have all your stuff in an LLC, you guys are partners, and you have a car accident, and somebody comes and sues you, they cannot take your ownership interest in your LLC away from you. Okay? And why is that? Because the law presumes that he doesn't want to be partners with anybody else but you. In a corporation, if you guys own stock and you own over somebody, they can come take your stock away from you, and all of a sudden he's got a partner that's a personal injury lawyer. That's the worst kind of partner you want to have. So an LLC, a charging order protected entity, makes sure that you will always continue to own that LLC. And I've had people put lots of money in an LLC, have an accident. The plaintiff's lawyer said, they got all this money. And I said, it's an LLC and you will never touch it. Now they say, well, they're making a salary. I get to the dividends. I said, we're never going to pay you a dividend again. We're going to turn you into an employee, and we don't garnish wages in Texas. So an LLC is not foolproof. And of course, it doesn't prevent you from liabilities that you incur with regard to farm, like bank, but an LLC is far and away the most flexible, the most thorough protection for a farm operation. And it's the easiest thing to pass on to the next generation because you're passing on ownership interest. You're not transferring a bunch of titles.
That's I don't know if we've ever laid it out that simply for our audience.
No, I think that's very good. I mean, we've always heard we should have an LLC.
Yep.
What I'd like to go to is, I'm a young farmer still, I think. I'm not technically, I've been doing it for over 10
I was
years.
thinking about this last night, and we always give Dave shit for acting younger than what he
Yep.
thinks he is.
Yep.
But I was thinking about that last night as we were hanging these sound barriers up in the studio, and we aren't spring chickens anymore, but I sure felt like I
Relatively
still can be.
considered to the average age of the farmer. We're young.
That's
right.
fair.
We just said 60 years, but it's always been hard to buy land, right? Hindsight's easy. You could say, yeah, you should have bought it back then and you did really well, but like it's never really cash flowed. But it seems like that gap has widened, at least here in Iowa. We're looking at what, $12,000-$14,000 average per acre, and then what we grow on it, which would be corn, beans, or cattle, maybe pigs, has gone the other way. And so it's really tough. But what I've learned is I used to complain about it, but through this podcast, through some land transactions of my own, is there's little tax laws and little nooks and crannies that the smart people, the millionaires, the billionaires have figured out, and we're here to help those people. So what are some of those ways we can make it easier?
Well, let me start off by saying everything that I do, going to Arkansas, all the other little stuff that I have, side stuff, people I've met, contacts, it's all about enhancing farm income. That's the way we keep farmland in the hands of farmers, is by continually enhancing on-farm income. That's the way we keep our kids on the farm. That's what's critical. And so let me highlight a few of those. There's two on the tax side, and then I'm going to throw two on kind of the non-tax side. On the tax side, and you've got to sponsor Boa Safra. Know those guys really well. I think they are extraordinarily intelligent, extraordinarily professional, and extraordinarily cutting edge, yet not foolish. Okay? And one of those is soil nutrient deductions. If you buy a farm, and again, I'm going to simplify this because they've been on there before, but if you buy a farm, the year you buy it or inherit it, you can deduct up to the value of the purchase price, up to the amount of the purchase price, the value of the nutrients in that soil. So in all soil, we have a aerobic zone, 6 3/4 inches, and there are companies, Boa Safra probably is the leading one, certainly, that will go in and give you an agronomy analysis, a forensic agronomy analysis, to tell you the value that of those nutrients. They will hand you an appraisal for you and your CPA to look at. So let's just take a very simple example. You buy 1,000 acres for $4,000. That's $4 million of purchase price. Well, if you use 180, you have a good analysis, you might get $1,700, $1,500 to $1,700 an acre as a deduction right now. That's $1.7 million that you can take off your tax return. Now, let's say, I'm going to go into a practical use of that. Let's say I don't have $4 million. We can't borrow $4 million, but there's an investor out there that wants to put $4 million into his farm to hedge his money. Okay, but you know about this deduction and he doesn't. Well, he can't take the deduction because he's not a farmer, and you can't take the deduction because you don't own the land. So how do we? That's free money. There's a purpose for the money, and nothing's free. But where does that money go? Well, if I'm in your shoes, I go to that Mr. Investor and I say, look, I've got a way to get you $1,000 an acre back. And they say, wait a minute, how's that? And I say, well, you give me 2 years free rent and I'll tell you. Or you get $1,500 back. You put that money into improving the farm. You put that money into building fences, improving irrigation. And so he's getting a tax deduction. He or she is getting a tax deduction. They can take it off their other taxes, but it's real money to that person. So you structure a lease as a revenue sharing lease. The investor owns the land. He gets a rent based on a percentage of revenue. And then the tax law says he's a farmer. And so he can take that deduction. But as a tenant, you say, well, wait a minute. I'm the one that's making this work. Help me you improve your farm, which helps me improve profit, which then you make more money. So in other words, every time there's a tax opportunity, there's two more people at the table. You as a landowner and you as the farmer. And work your way towards helping, sharing in that. That's one tax revenue. Carbon credits. You guys, I'm sure, have had carbon credit people on there. And that is farmers, by adopting sustainable regenerative practices, and we won't get into what that is. Let's assume we can get that. There are major food companies, Walmart, Nestle, Nabisco, General Mill. All these people will pay more for product produced on sustainable regenerative farms. That satisfies their ESG goals. Okay, no matter how you feel about those, it satisfies ESG goals, and they get to make more money. There is so many more opportunities for farmers to make money besides what they produce out of the ground. I have some rancher clients, friends of mine in South Texas. They make more money from carbon credits than they do raising cattle. And that's like, how's that possible? Well, ranches tend to get a pretty high rating for carbon capture. So that's another thing. Now, let me shift to the non-tax side just for a second. There are so many new programs for new farmers, and y'all are way too old for those. I'm just kidding. But new farmers, the USDA is by and large a real sensitivity to keeping farmers, the age of farmers, not getting any worse. So there's a lot of new farmer grants. There's the USDA has a ton of programs to help farmers get into the business. So I would say, new farmer, you go find your local USDA agent or whatever, and just pick his brain and say, look, you got to help me get into this farm. There are other farmers right now that are, there's some banks that are doing some, Bank of Oklahoma, BOK, they're doing a lot of farmer-oriented programs. So there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of hedge fund New York money want to be out here. But first of all, be careful who you take your money from, because you don't want to just buy you a job. And so you really need a partnership with the right kind of money.
Harvest season is here, and so is your competitive advantage.
That's right. The Estes XPR3 concaves are a total game changer. Think one concave, all crops, no bands, no switching. From wheat to corn, soybeans, you're rolling non-stop. Backed by their patented technology with 250% more threshing surface, you get cleaner grain, fewer fines, and beast-level capacity, all without trading combines.
If you're interested, visit EstesPerformanceConcaves.com to upgrade your combine today. Estes XPR3, harvest smarter, faster, and better.
So before you go on to the next, I do have something to tie what you said about LLCs and Section 180 and some of these tax laws. So I purchased ground in my name, not an LLC. I use Section 1030 or 1031 exchange and Section 180, but with Boa Safra. Can I now put my land into an LLC without hurting my Section 180 and my 1031?
Well, there's two different questions. You're not going to hurt your 180 deduction. 1031, normally 1031, if you and I exchange property, okay, Joe to Fred, if I sold my property that's in Fred's name, me, and I take property in Fred, that's the cleanest 1031. Because the 1031 law says you need to be exchanging property held for investment for other property held for investment. Yep. So, but to be held for investment generally means you have to hold land for a certain period of time. So if you do a 1031 exchange and then immediately sell it, then there would be a question, wait a minute, are you really holding this for investment, or was this whole transaction just a way of getting you out from under something?
It'd kick you into short-term capital gains.
Correct. So the best way to do it is wait a period of time, put it into an LLC, and then let that LLC be the next exchanging party the next time you do this. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. But then it won't like revert back and say
No.
you exchange it, or
I think if you're a single owner LLC, single member. Now, if you put it into an LLC with me as a partner, that might cause an
That's
issue.
different.
I see.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
different.
okay.
So let's just start with the big concept, and then you can talk to a professional to get more detail. But make the exchanging, the acquiring entity, the same for you as your disposing entity, whenever possible. So that LLC might end up owning 4 or 5 successive pieces of property, but let it continue to be the exchanging party.
Okay.
Very cool. I want to stay on this Section 180 topic because we've had a couple episodes to where we've explored that, got to talk to Tyler and Bryce and had a lot of fun with them. Obviously, Dave's used this, Corey's used this. I hope to use it sometime in the future if I ever get an opportunity. But this is the first time that anybody's brought up that unique situation of material participation in a relationship between a landlord and a tenant, because we do have a lot of listeners that haven't bought ground and don't have that opportunity soon that could actually take value from knowing Section 180 exists with a landlord or an investor that they work with.
Well, and you
That's
make a really good
fascinating.
You make a really good point. It's not one way to do it is the landlord not only shares in the rent, and we do a lot of leases, and I've developed a way to do the rent sharing, but the material participation, Tanner, is a great word. If the investor materially participates, he can also qualify. The challenge with that is that if the 3 of us buy a piece of farm, we don't want anybody participating. We want them to leave us alone. Don't tell us what to do. So sometimes the rent sharing is actually easier than material participation.
Well, it goes back to you say, be careful who you take money
Exactly.
from, right? It's if you have a good relationship. I've actually went into some leases on my own farm with landlords that I trust well, where it's a crop share.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed that. You know, it's kind of an older tactic around here. Not a lot of people have done that for a while, but they're involved in it. They get tax benefits because they're actively farming. And we share in the good and the bad times. So they weren't sitting there gouging me for $400 or $500 rent, which I wouldn't have paid when times were good. And then they're not sitting there going, well, I know the markets are down, but we still need $380. You know, like, so it's a complete share. And I mean, if you got good relationships, I agree with it.
And let me just take 1 minute. I have set in on the land report last year. I kind of got in trouble. One guy was in there talking about he had investors that would buy land, and they would buy land from a farmer. The farmer could cash out and continue to farm. And it was just the greatest thing ever. And the landlords, the investor pool got a return. So I just raised my hand, and it's just like, this is ridiculous. But what I said is, so how long are you going to be in that investment? 2 to 3 years. And you flip it and the investor get their money back. I said, well, so the farmer has to have a new landlord every 2 or 3 years. Right. Well, and you give a farmer, let's say, $2 million for his land, and now he's got a job. Right. And that $2 million, they buy a house, they buy a condo in Colorado. His wife gets a new Lexus. You get a new Dodge Dually. You take a trip around the world. They don't have any money left, and the guy's now got a job. I mean, I'm doing this in front of 250 people. I said, this is a horrible idea. And what does this farmer leave to his kids? A job. I had 4 or 5 guys come out to me afterwards and says, I've never seen anybody not read the room or read the room so poorly before he gave that. I said, and I asked him again, I said, surely you've got some kind of value add that you give to this guy besides just giving him all this money. He didn't know what to say. He was dumbfounded. So I would say leasing from your neighbors, leasing from family, leasing from a prior owner, that's different. 50% of the land in Iowa is leased from somebody. But to enter into a relationship where you sell out to a non-identified lessor and you buy yourself a job, you put a lot of money in your pocket, but you've left nothing to the next generation. And so that's a problem. I want to go back to soil nutrient just really quick, just for a second. The other interesting thing about that is a lot of land in Iowa is auctioned, and there's a lot of buyers of Iowa land that are not farmers. They're not from Iowa. And so you're at a disadvantage because they're not buying for productivity. They're buying to hedge their money. We have $10 million. We're just going to put it into land. We really don't care that much about rate of return. All that we know is in 10 years, it's going to be worth another 50%. So you're at a disadvantage.
Dave tells me it's all about return.
Yeah. and so where you're at is you're at a disadvantage because your motivation to buy is different than theirs. Well, if you have 30% of the purchase price in your pocket because you know you have a soil nutrient deduction coming, then you can bid maybe more than they do because you've got some house money in your pocket through tax benefits and tax deductions. So you got to work.
But hold on. We all have the same access to Section 180. We just have that knowledge of the product before the auction.
That's right.
That gives you that additional confidence.
Right.
But if you know and I know, we're bidding on a level playing field.
Absolutely. But if you're bidding
Go
against a New York guy that's sitting on a pot of money and all he wants to do is put it somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
That's tough. I want to jump back. You were talking about sale lease back. Is that you were opposed to? Is that what that's?
I'm opposed to a guy going out and marketing that as something that's really good for farmers. Because he isn't thinking about the farmer. He's thinking about the investors.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think it's a tool, right? I want to play devil's advocate here. Like, say that was something that you exchanged into that really doesn't fit your farming portfolio, or the ground that you want to own forever, that you want to pass on to your kids. It's not within 2 miles. Say you went 30 miles out and you're farming it. Going to find a sale leaseback there might make sense if you put that money towards good and don't go buy the Lexus and
Exactly.
the Dodge Dually, which no one wants a Dodge anyway. But
I'm not crashing the tool. I'm crashing who's promoting
the way it was
and
sold.
for what.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that was like, there is a way that it could be good.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, leasing is real. It's just another form of financing, right? I mean, it's just another form of financing. And the question is, if you take your equity out and you burn it up, then you become truly a sharecropper who has no interest in the land.
Right.
Yep. Well, I think one of the last topics I want to make sure we cover today is we understand that farming's not the way Grandpa used to do it. Farming's not the way Dad used to do it. And we are running into a lot of these out-of-state landlords or landlords that don't have that direct tie to agriculture anymore. So we're moving further and further away from handshake agreements. Whether that's a handshake agreement on cash rent, a handshake agreement on custom farming rates, on who plows the snow in the old lady's driveway, into contracts. I want to know from your experience, if somebody still believes in a handshake agreement, what's a horror story that you've seen to where that's blown up and not worked?
Well, man, the horror stories could be long. I would say probably one of the worst ones was that. Well, let me put it this way. This was even with a pretty well written lease. The horror stories are not necessarily the handshake or the document. The horror stories are just a difference of objectives between landlord and tenant. And one of them was a very large, huge landowner in Arkansas, and the tenants were economically at a disadvantage, and consequently, there was always disputes about payments on time, soil, fertilizer. The tenant just never farmed it like the landlord did. And so no matter whether there was a strong lease or not, they were just misaligned. So respectfully, yeah, I want to believe that handshakes work, but so often true expectations are never shared. And so the handshake ones in South Texas, the horror stories always revolve around maintenance. Whose job is it to repair fences, gates, dig out stock tanks? And without a written document, the tenant, a good, hardworking operator, gets kicked off after a couple of years because the landlord just doesn't think the guy's done enough. That's where a lease is really valuable because it protects the tenant as much as anybody.
Yeah, Corey, he's not really good at getting his roadside ditches mowed and spraying his fence rows, right? So that could be something you want to make sure you protect.
Yeah.
Well, no, Corey's actually maintaining fence rows because he's creating pollination zones. So that's a regenerative practice to let the bees work to pollinate. So,
yeah, why do you think my bee numbers and my pheasant, and my quail numbers are so high, Tanner? I should get carbon credits for this.
Credit for something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do. I've seen some of that around this area. Of course, Dave, he'd been really good to add value on this episode of where he's run into issues of it's hard to terminate a lease that doesn't exist because it's a verbal. It's the same thing when it passes to the next generation of, well, I've just always paid this or just always paid what I can. That doesn't work when it transitions to the next generation.
Well, there's so many government grants and programs that are dependent upon the tenant being able to produce a written lease in order to get crop insurance or to get, payments or benefits. So you're going to be forced into getting those written documents more and more.
You got a bunch of questions piled up?
I think I asked him on the way. I mean, yeah, I do think Dave would have been really good. I know he would have chimed in when you were talking easements. He's been fighting one of those for a long time, it seems like. And quite frankly, they're deal killers when they get held up in court. It's just then people walk away.
We've had a couple of scenarios around here locally that, as generations change and farmers age, acreages are passing hands. And there's an odd question about if somebody died in the farmhouse, does it have to be disclosed? And if so, is there a penalty if it's not? Because, everybody in the community knows. But if somebody's going to move into a new area, they won't.
I don't know if I understand.
It's funny. What we have a problem, the disclosure of violent crime or cooking meth. I mean, meth is a big deal, has been a big deal. And so, you buy a lot of rural property that has trailer house, and then you're going to put your hired hand in there. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. How do I get rid of that trailer?
Right. With a residual or,
hazardous
a tie
materials is probably something we don't look at enough. Every farm has a burn pit, right? I had a burn pit. We all have a burn pit. And then it doesn't hurt to go out and dig around or somebody look at that because there may be batteries in it or there may be oil that's been dumped in. That's part of that due diligence. Don't think anything is not a problem. Everything's a problem until you satisfy it in your mind.
I have heard those stories to where someone buys an acreage with a grand plan to put a new house over here or put up a shop, and they start their excavation process and find a buried old hog confinement or, somebody that buried an old garage. You just run into a hiccup because there was something there, and it's just now 2 foot deep.
You just got to move it.
I have a client right now that's wanting to build about a $3 million house on the most beautiful point of his whole ranch. And there is oil and gas and pumping equipment for a well that was abandoned 10 years ago. And he can't. His money's sitting in the bank. He can't. And so I call the oil and gas company. And oil and gas companies have a certain period of time before they clean them up. They can post a bond to put off the deadline for cleanup. So that gets back to look at your title file. Go walk around, kick stuff. There's oil and gas signs on the sign of whose well this is. Call those people. Anyway, you're right.
This would be one of the topics that we talk about on like perpetual leases of windmills, solar, cell phone towers, things of that nature. Like we've all heard the horror stories of, even Tanner's family has like some of the first windmills that went up. They're not in production anymore, but their anchors are still running into the ground, concrete and steel sticking up out of the ground. And they went bankrupt, never cleaned up.
Well, and the horror story with those is you take them down. What do you do with them? You can't really grind them up in anything else. So literally in West Texas, there are acres and acres and acres of old turbines that have been taken down. Technology changes, and then what do we do with them? That's the irony, I hate to say hypocrisy, of a lot of environmental stuff, because the unforeseen cost will be paid someday. And that is, how do we get rid of some of this stuff? Anyway, that's another soapbox that I have that's carpeted. I get on it so much.
But it's definitely a good thing to consider to talk to someone like you when you're negotiating these leases. You need to be compensated very, very well, because there's a potential for some very bad things to happen down the road. And it might not be you. It might be your kids. It might be your grandkids.
You may be cleaning up something somebody created years ago. Yeah.
Well, Jim, this was a pleasure. One, it was great to meet you yesterday to prepare for this conversation. It's fun to see somebody that's so invested into the world of agriculture and farming and ranching to be able to dedicate themselves to go back to school just to learn more and be able to provide that value. If our listeners heard something today that tripped a thought or a question, are you open to them connecting with you?
Absolutely. I love talking about this stuff. I'm passionate about it. I own a small piece of ground. I say I've learned more about farming sitting at my desk. We're doing legal work, and I've learned more about legal work by farming, because I know what it's like to roll over. I've been run over by 2 bulls on my farm. So I get the challenges, but I also know the legal side. I'm not the best lawyer in the world, but I understand both sides pretty well. And so I love to talk about it.
Now, wait a minute. Yesterday, you told me you were the best real estate attorney in Texas.
The best real estate. No, I would say I'm above average farm and ranch real estate lawyer. And generally it's because I've been out there on the farm. You know, I know the difference between a John Deere and a whitetail and a mule deer, you know. People say, where do you get your clients as a farm and ranch lawyer? You get them at the feed store. You know, it's not at the Chamber of Commerce. So anyway, I love the ag world for sure.
Well, we thank you so much for taking the time, for the willingness to prepare, the willingness to help educate and break some of the things down that we've talked about in generalities in the past, and now have a very applicable way of putting those together for our listeners.
If they do want to connect with you, do you have a website? How best to connect?
Yeah, there's two. One is our law firm is EKD, Eggleston King Davis, EKDlaw.com. And then I have affiliated or joined about 18 other experts. I have 18 shows for you in the future, by the way. 18 other experts called Landwise Partners. And we help ag tech businesses come to the table. I'm working with a company right now that has an organic, zero carbon footprint solution to toxic algae. It's unbelievable. It would be phenomenal for you guys to talk to these people. They've worked on it for 24 years, and it kills the algae without releasing the toxic blooms, which is a big problem in the fish farming, aquaculture, fresh water. Anyway, that's an example. We help large banks that have a problem farm and they need some help. So we have water, we have agronomists, we have carbon credit. Zach is on our board. Anyway, so that's landwisepartners.com. And you can find not only me, but 17 other experts in different areas of agriculture. And there's a half a dozen guys on there that would be a lot of fun for you guys to talk to.
We're looking them up right now. That
we like job security.
Is an absolute great group of people. Some names we already recognize, so that's really neat to look those up.
Paul Neefer, I'm sure.
Yep.
There's a Dr. T.J. Bradford. He's a PhD from Mississippi State, an incredibly interesting, bright guy, knows the USDA world. It's a fun bunch of guys, and I think we all do that to make a living, but we all do it too because we respect and this is a stupid word. We respect and love each other because we all have the same love for agriculture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And special thanks to Boa Safra, Section 180, Legacy Nutrient Deductions here too. Love those guys. If you've bought a farm or looking at buying a farm, definitely look into them. It is it's not very well known, and it's a great tool to help you get into it. So definitely look into those guys.
And started and owned by farmers. That's what makes it really cool too,
Mhm.
because
Yep.
they know the pain and the joy of farming.
Yeah. Jim, we thank you again so much for taking the time. Listeners, we appreciate you as always. So until next time, have a good one.
Farm for Profit Podcast.